Thank you very much, Mr. President. We've got a number of questions that hopefully will take as little of your time as possible, but enough time so that our audience members who submitted a lot of questions will be satisfied. First question: these are anonymous for the most part, so I'm not going to identify anybody who's written their name down. But a two-part question, hopefully related: what do you consider your toughest issue in the upcoming campaign? How do you plan to deal with it? And if reelected, what will be your priorities in the second term?
As you know, I just said that we are negotiating several agreements. We may be able to accomplish some of them before the end of the year. So we will proceed to deal with the rest. And in addition to economic issues, cultural issues are also very important. In our negotiation with the mainland last year, we concluded an agreement on protection of intellectual property rights. But so far, the cultural exchange between the two sides are still hampered by a lot of regulations. For instance, we already reached an agreement between Taiwan and the mainland to export films to the other side. And there's no limit for Taiwanese film going to the mainland. But so far, not a single film has been allowed to be shown. For mainland China, there is a limit of 10 films a year. So far, we have already shown some. So there is a gap between the understanding of the two sides on some of the cultural exchange items. That's going to be a very important one for the two sides. And so far, we haven't got any agreement on publications, books, or other items in this regard. So we do have many things that we have to tackle if I get elected next year. And we'll slowly move into other areas. But so far, those are the most urgent and most important ones for us. What are you driving at?
I guess the question is what's your toughest challenge as you look forward to the election? What do you see that's out there that is the biggest obstacle to re-election?
Well, as you know, we always have some difficulties with the mainland on things that touches upon issues of sovereignty or other things. As you know, recently we did have some difficulties in this regard. But I think by and large, the two sides under the principles of 92 consensus are ready to negotiating things in a way that is mutually acceptable. We have had difficulties when we negotiate the ECFA with the mainland. Even in the language, the terms we use, you're an expert in Mandarin Chinese, you understand. The framework, the English word framework, is translated in Taiwan as 架构, but in mainland it's 框架. So we call this a framework agreement with different translations. And that is the point. Neither side could, make any concession. And there are several terms that have this problem. So eventually, when we sum up or wrap up the agreement, the two sides came up with an interesting solution. They add one sentence after Article 16, which is the last article of ECFA, by providing that all the corresponding terms that have different expression means the same. Just one sentence that takes up all. You see, sometimes when the teams negotiating for quite a while, and sometimes will spark interesting conclusions which solve the problem just right away. So I think as the negotiations continue in the future, certainly more mutual trust will be built as a result.
Thank you. That's very helpful. A question on the defense budget. The defense budget has obviously been cut recently. I guess the question is, will you increase it to 3% of GDP as earlier suggested?
Yes, we did hope we could have 3% of our GDP as our defense budget, and we made it in 2008, 2009, but we were not able to do it in 2009 and 2010. Why? Because of the financial tsunami and economic downturn. But for the coming year, we are still unable to do it, but the absolute amount is more than that of last year's budget. The only problem is last year, the GDP grew at 10.82%, which is a record in 23 years. And that makes it very difficult for the military budget to grow at the same speed. But believe me, we have already made adequate arrangement, not just for the procurement of weaponry from the United States, but for our own plans to have a voluntary military force. So the absolute number is more than that of last year, but the percentage is still behind the expected 3%. So we will try, in the future to catch up with that. But I can assure you, we do have the resolve to defend ourselves, and we try other ways to continue strengthen our soldiers, our forces, and our way of making a viable defense. On the other hand, another issue of income distribution will also be an important election topic. And in the last year or so, we have tried very hard to increase our social welfare program so that more people will benefit from the fast developing economy. And also, we use a variety of ways to keep the prices stable. As a matter of fact, the consumer price index in Taiwan is the lowest in Asia, next only to that of Japan. Although people's feeling a little bit different because the economists use a different method to as the samples, but by and large, I think we will do our best to keep the gap between the rich and the poor as low as possible. It's not easy, but compared to other ethnic Chinese society, I think Taiwan's income distribution is probably the best. But on the other hand, we're not satisfied with the status quo. We'll continue to do that through a variety of ways. As you know, the unemployment rate in Taiwan has been down for consecutive 19 months. Now it stood at 4.48%, the lowest in 29 months. We expect to see it continue to go down in the next couple of months. So that will help to get more people jobs. And in recent months, actually the complaint from the market, from the company, is that actually there's a shortage of labor, particularly skilled labor, as a result of a fast economic recovery. So all these problems we have, had a chance to debate with our opponents in the coming election.
Thank you. That was very comprehensive. This question is from a self-identified mainland China scholar and wants a discussion on the future political talks across the strait. Two-part question. What serves as the political and social foundation for the beginning of political talks? And then, secondly, what is the one thing you'd most expect the mainland to do to make such talks possible for the mutual benefit of both sides?
In concluding the 15 agreements in the last 3 years, once in a while we will touch issues that it's not by nature a political one, but sometimes has political meaning or significance, as I just mentioned, the wording, for instance. So we have handled that, in the last 3 years. But we, at the moment, do not consider it is the most urgent thing to tackle the sort of pure political issues. For instance, sovereignty or confidence building measures. Those are important. Those are not included in our agenda. But obviously, at the moment, we don't have any timetable for that. As I repeatedly said, our hands are full with all those issues that are deeply involved with our people's livelihood. As you know, the 8 years before we took office, a lot of things were actually left idle without any progress. And what we have been doing in the last 3 years is really to make up the lost 8 years. So far, we haven't finished that job yet. For instance, Taiwan and the Chinese mainland last year has a bilateral trade of more than 150 billion US dollars. For two economies of a bilateral trade of this magnitude, after so many years, then we had a ECFA. This is really unthinkable in other occasions, in other parts of the world. But it happened because of the very strange political relations between the two sides. So we want to institutionalize the cross-strait interaction so that gradually the two sides can interchange, can interact with each other in a way a normal economic entities do.
Thank you. Next question on confidence building measures in military affairs between the mainland and Taiwan. What are the prospects for military-to-military CBMs at this point?
Well, a military confidence building measures require a political foundation. So it is, in essence, a political CBM. As I said, along the way from the 3 years ago in concluding so many agreements, 15 of them, we do achieve some kind of confidence building in the process. If I remember correctly, 3 years ago when we first started, actually the negotiating team didn't even know each other. But 3 years later, many people in different ministries across Taiwan Strait could just pick up the phone and call their counterparts in solving some of the problems. This is something we certainly would like to see more, so that we don't have to confine all the contacts to the Strait Exchange Foundation or to the Association for Relations Across Taiwan Strait, ARAT, and the SEF. In other words, the different ministries and their different ministries could always contact each other on issues of a minor importance. So the two sides is gradually building collectively, jointly, a net of relationship that could handle problems right away when it occurs.
Thank you. The process of rapprochement on the economic side, or generally with the mainland, is certainly a difficult diplomatic and political dance. On the one hand, you have a certain percentage of the population on Taiwan that is inherently suspicious or nervous about greater coming together across the strait through the embodiment of the ECFA and other agreements. And then you have the mainland that's inherently suspicious and displeased about the military relationship with the United States. I guess the question is, how do you square these conflicts, and what role, if any, does the military relationship with the United States play in either setting a political tone in Taiwan that allows a rapprochement or otherwise?
Well, by and large, the people in Taiwan generally support our security relations with the United States. They also support our economic relations with the mainland. And I'm sure you are aware that in the last more than 20 years, in the opinion polls we have conducted, the the vast majority of the people support maintenance of the status quo, more than 70 or even 80%. So in other words, they understand that there's no chance for either the supporters of the jury independence or reunification to prevail under current circumstances. So most of the people in Taiwan are pragmatic enough to understand the need to maintain security ties with the United States. And that not only means purchasing arms, but also for other security cooperation. We also understand very well that mainland China is vehemently opposed to that. But we keep telling them that it is very important to keep the balance across Taiwan Strait. And there are quite a few military hardware we cannot manufacture locally. And those are basically defensive in nature. And they are purchased to really replace the aging items we have in our arsenal. So I think this is very important for the two sides of the Taiwan Strait and the United States to understand. A right military balance across Taiwan Strait is vital to peace and stability. And our relations with the United States will not hamper our relations with the mainland. I said it in my speech that I want to create a virtuous cycle so that the deepening of relations with the mainland could also help our international participation. And an expanded participation in the international community would also help our people to have more confidence and more interest in developing a deeper relations with the Chinese mainland. I have used many occasions to prove that the virtuous circle is not something that a wishful thinking. It is a matter of fact.
Thank you. A question about internal domestic Taiwan politics. At least those of us from the outside observe a rather sharp divide in the political basis in China, or excuse me, in Taiwan. And the question is there a means to bridge that divide? And if so, what are you doing, or what can you do to bridge it?
That is a job we have to do constantly. Every policy involving cross-strait relations, we have to do the kind of public communication. But let me just take the process of negotiating ECFA with the Chinese mainland as an example. It started actually 2 years ago when we announced that we want to negotiate such an economic cooperation agreement with the mainland. The first response from the populace is not that enthusiastic because general populace didn't understand what it means. So it took us almost a whole year to do the public communication. And we also asked a think tank to come up with econometric statistics. But again, people didn't know what's going on. So last year, just about this time of year, when the chairwoman of DPP said they want to debate with me on this issue, I said, why not? I accept right away. Against the advice of many of my friends, they said, this is unprecedented. I said, I want to take that opportunity to really make my people understand what ECFA means to Taiwan. So it gave me a golden opportunity to outline what we have in mind in negotiating such an agreement with the mainland. So after the debate, the support rate shot up because people now understand what we're going to have. But still, because before we came up with the actual contents of the agreement, people still have some doubts. So roughly 2 months later, before we sign the agreement, we have to report that to our national parliament. And we let people know there are 539 export items from Taiwan to the mainland and 267 from mainland to Taiwan. So they immediately understand which section of the business will be affected. By then, the support rate is well above 50 or 60%. So it takes time to do the public communication. It's not that easy. For instance, another one is to allow mainland students to come to our university campuses. Again, the DPP opposed that vehemently, but then the university professors, presidents, came out to support that. They say, listen, we need competition. We need to open up our campuses for competition. And this is the best way for the two sides to understand each other. That is to let the young people to get to know each other at an early stage of their life. You see, they are impartial and rational voices in the society that will come up. So after that, we passed the necessary law, and that will become a reality a couple of months from now.
Thank you. The Taiwan Relations Act is now 32 years old, and you've started to see at least some public commentary in the United States, albeit I think still very much fringe commentary, questioning the basis of the U.S.-Taiwan relationship and questioning the U.S. interest in a continued relationship with Taiwan that we've sustained. How would you suggest, or how would you recommend that the United States and Taiwan continue to improve our relationship so that these kinds of questions are laid to rest?
Obviously, Taiwan Relations Act is a successful piece of legislation. Throughout the last 32 years, so many American presidents, in spite of their political parties or their political beliefs, they all support that. And 2 years ago, when we commemorate the 30th anniversary, almost everyone says that's a great legislation. Of course, there have to be other actions or commitments along with the Taiwan Relations Act. For instance, the August 17th communique in 1982 between Washington and Beijing, where the U.S. made some commitment. But the U.S. also made the 6 assurances to Taiwan that there's no deadline for the sale of defensive weapons to Taiwan, and no consultation will be held between Washington and Peking before a decision is made. And the U.S. will not play the role of a mediator between the two sides. All this very solid, very concrete assurances becomes a very important cornerstone of peace and stability in this part of the world. We certainly appreciate very, very much. We understand the TRA is just a domestic legislation. It's not a treaty. But U.S. government, president, seems to be very faithful in implementing the contents of Taiwan Relations. Okay? On behalf of the government and people of this country, I really want to express my deep appreciation to the American government and people.
We have time just for one last question, Mr. President, and then we want to let you make any concluding comments. So one last question, and then we will wrap it up.
I guess the last question, and you've been extraordinarily generous with your time already, and as we've asked these rather broad and difficult questions, the final question relates to beyond ECFA, Taiwan's economic relations with the rest of Asia and beyond. What are the prospects for a free trade agreement or its equivalent with Singapore or other countries, other economies? And to what extent does Beijing have an effective veto on such free trade agreements?
Certainly, the conclusion of ECFA is the first step for Taiwan to rejoin regional economic integration in this part of the world. Before that, Taiwan and North Korea were the only two countries that have not participated in the regional economic integration in East Asia. When we finish ECFA, just almost immediately, many countries in the region expressed an interest to discuss with us the potentials of having a similar arrangement or other types of arrangement relating to economic problems. So this is a very important step for Taiwan, actually, to join, to come back to the economic landscape in this part of the world. Now, we are negotiating a similar agreement with Singapore, and we are making some progress, but it takes some time. On the other hand, other countries in the region also express an interest. So we are assessing the pros and cons and also the economic situation of the countries involved to see whether it is in the two sides' best interest to do that. I'm sure what happened between Taiwan and mainland China also have some impact on the relations of other countries with us and with the mainland. But by and large, this is a virtuous cycle. In other words, let me just give you an example. For the first quarter of this year, the trade between Taiwan and the mainland went up 15%. But our trade with ASEAN countries went up more than 30%. Our trade with the U.S., again, went up more than 30%. Sounds a little bit ironic. We signed an agreement with the mainland, but other countries also benefit from the side effect. This is exactly what we want. We want to diversify our export market, not just with the mainland, but mainland continues to be our largest trading partner, our largest export market, our largest the surplus earner country. So we will continue the very, very mutually beneficial relationship. As I said, we shouldn't put all our eggs in one basket, but we can't really leave no eggs in one of the largest baskets of the world.
Nicely put. Mr. President, you've been extraordinarily generous. I'll ask you to have any final words that you might have, and then I'll turn it back over to my boss for his offerings of good day.
My closing remarks. Dear friends and colleagues, as the famous American poet Robert Frost once wrote, I took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. The past 3 years have witnessed unprecedented breakthroughs and positive developments in Taiwan and the region. Yet, for the road ahead, we will need to be patient and careful in our political rhetoric, in the signals we send, in the gestures we make, and in the reputation we cultivate. I draw reassurances from the positive developments that continue to unfold across the strait and in the international community. And I have full confidence in my administration's roadmap. On a deeper level, the improvement of cross-strait relations in the past 3 years reflects the result of something fundamentally more significant: the comprehensive overhaul of Taiwan's strategic approach to the world. An approach that has coupled cross-strait relations, the economy, and foreign relations together in such a way as to fully maximize Taiwan's potential value in the global community. Taiwan has to transform itself into a peacemaker, a contributor of humanitarian aid, a center for innovation and business opportunities, a major promoter of cultural exchange, and the standard bearer of Chinese culture. As the Republic of China reaches its centennial anniversary, I believe my administration's grand strategy will make the Republic more secure, more prosperous for many, many years to come. I also firmly believe America's friendship will be an inseparable part of the Republic of China's future, as it has been in the past 100 years. Thank you very much.
President Ma, thank you for this rare privilege. It's been a real privilege to have you with us. I know I've been watching the faces of the audience here. You have deeply engaged everyone, and we want to thank you for taking the time to do this today. You know, all societies have only three ways to make major decisions. You know, you make it in a marketplace where a good is priced and you decide if you want to buy it or not, or somebody will decide if they want to produce it at that or lower price. That's one way. A second way, of course, is in an administrative proceeding. You've established the rules of the road in a court or some administrative proceeding, and if there's a problem, you go there. The only other way that societies make major decisions is through politics. Politics is so crucial because it's where you take the complex aspirations of a people and you turn it into a concrete agenda. But politics is about leadership, not following. You know, too many politicians are followers, not leaders. And I think this morning we've had a chance to see a man who's a leader who created a vision, a very powerful vision. It's not necessarily always popular, but it is making a profound change. And we are deeply grateful for what you're doing, Mr. President, and sharing your insights with us. Thank you, and we wish you a very pleasant evening.
Thank you so much for your